number 10, we have the Temple of Amida in Japan. Let's kick off this list by flying over to Japan. The Japanese have some of the best ghost stories in history. I still have scenes from The Ring and The Grudge burned into my brain. Those were perfect movies for me to watch as a 13-year-old boy. I remember the girl in the closet who looks like she just got pushed through a trash compactor and then left out in the sun for 8 years. Yeah, when you're 13 and you see that out of nowhere, you don't forget it overnight. Well, this is a classic Japanese ghost story from the Temple of Amida that was built 700 years ago. Legend goes that a blind man was brought to play music for a dead emperor in the graveyard. He was led by a priest, but the blind dude didn't know he was playing music for a bunch of ghosts. The priest would cover his body in protective symbols so the spirits couldn't see him. But one time he brought the blind dude in, but he forgot to cover his ears, so the spirits cut his ears off. Then he died in the graveyard. It's said that you can still hear the blind guy's music playing in the graveyard. Ooh. At number 9, we have the Church of St. Nicholas in Plunkett, England. We're gonna jump on a plane and fly over to jolly old England for the most haunted town in the UK. Plunkett, England is a place where the hauntings are hot and the people still live there. Everyone knows you can live wherever you want, right? It's not the 1800s anymore, where if you try to move to a new town, half your family will die and it'll take you a year and a half. Plunkett is so haunted that when Halloween rolls around, they need to bring in more cops because so many drunk dummies come to the town to dress slutty and see if they can run into a phantom. And in this town is the Church of St. Nicholas, where the spirit of Lady Deering walks around looking for her dead kid. It's said that she was buried in 7 lead coffins, but it didn't stop her from breaking out and haunting the hell out of this church. I don't even think lead does anything to ghosts. I think it's supposed to be silver. They were probably like 7 silver coffins? Jesus Christ, that's expensive. Let's use lead and hope for the best. At number 8, we have the Chapel of Bones. Now it's time to head over to Portugal for one of the creepiest arts and crafts projects I've ever seen. Back in Portugal, somewhere in the 16th century, the cemeteries were getting too full. People were dying too quick. So when this happens, they need to dig up all the old, already rotted bodies, take out the dry bones, and then plop the fresh bodies into the hole. Now usually when you got something like this happening, they take all the bones, then make something like the Paris catacombs. But that's not what the monks of the Church of St. Francis wanted to do. They were like, hey, let's take all these dope bones and make a bone house so everyone can bone in it. No, they did build a chapel made of bones, but that's not why they built it. They built this clavicle castle to remind people they were going to die, so they should be good people before they die. They were literally like, you see this? You see this spooky skeleton house? Be a better person! It's made with concrete and using around 5,000 bones. I wonder if that's legal to do today. Like if I built a little doghouse made out of bones on my front yard for my dog and to scare kids off my lawn. Could I do that? At number 7, we have St. Andrew's Church in Selkirk, Manitoba. Get your winter coat, we're heading over to Selkirk, Manitoba to check out the Church of St. Andrew's. We're going all over the world with this one. By the end of this video, you'll have no excuse not to check out a scary church. Unless you're like me and you're just not going to do that because that's a terrible way to spend your day. Well, the Church of St. Andrews is nicknamed St. Andrews on the Red because if you're lucky, you'll see a set of glowing red eyes in the church. Great, I put on all my nice clothes for church and I just pissed myself. People have also said that they've seen a ghost dude and a ghost lady walking around the graveyard. And my favorite haunting from this church is people have said they've seen a ghost car. What? I didn't know ghosts could have cars. This might be the only ghost with a car. If this is true, this guy for sure bangs. If you're the only dude in the afterlife with a ball and ride, you're getting laid. Dude, this ghost is probably just riding past the cemetery to pick up chicks. This dude could be driving the only Phantom Rolls-Royce Phantom. At number 6, we have the St. Mark's Episcopal Church in the UK. Back to England, guys, it's apparently the bell tower of this haunted church that is the hotspot for supernatural activity. Legend says that the stonemason who was building the tower fell to his death before the tower was finished, and then started haunting the workers who came to finish the tower. They pleased the spirit by building him his own room in the tower, which is so funny to me. They were like, we know you're upset that you're dead, but we all came together and got you something nice. Here's your room. There's a little bench in it, there's a memory foam mattress, and we know you're a stonemason, so we filled the bookcase full of the best books about stonemasonry. Do you like it? At number 5, we have St. George's Church in the Czech Republic. This church is old as hell. It was built in 1352. I'll bet money that this building is not up to code. Well, back in the day when this church was shiny and new, it didn't take long before the people thought it was cursed because fires kept breaking out in the darn thing. People kept going though. In the Czech Republic, they're not afraid of curses. But in 1968, when the roof collapsed on some people during a funeral, everyone decided to stop going to church. church. Kinda. They held mass outside. These guys really love God. Because there was now a massive hole in the roof, the townfolk needed to find a way to fix it. And they did this by playing up the whole curse story of the church. They put in some sculptures of shrouded figures in the church and then turned it into a haunted tourist attraction and raised enough money to fix the church. Oh, this one's kinda sweet. At number 4 we have Basilica of Our Lady of Good Health. We're in India, baby, in the town of Velankani, where the site of this church was picked because they saw spirits beforehand. They wanted the church to be haunted even before it was built. Interesting choice. There's several ghosts who have been walking around this place, primarily one of a woman and her young child, who people think is Mother Mary and Jesus himself. People have even said that they've been healed by these ghosts, but I think they're probably liars. At number 3 we have the Church of Bones. Another church covered in bones. Bricks must have been expensive back then. Well, this one is way crazier than the Bone House. It all started in 1278 when an abbot came to the spot where the church stands today with a handful of dirt. He said the dirt was from the site where Jesus was crucified, and then he dusted the land with it. Then everyone in Europe wanted to be buried there. It was the place to get buried, baby. So there were a ton of bodies there. Then in the 1800s they wanted to build a church there, so they had to dig up all the bodies, and it was one dude's job to stack all the bones. He made 6 pyramids of bones from 70,000 people. The bones were later used to decorate the whole church. There's a chandelier in there that has every bone from the human body. At number 2 we got Old Rock Church in Texas. We made it to America, where this little abandoned church is still a happening place. It was built between 1884 and 1886, but shut down not too long after because another church got built nearby. But that didn't stop this place from being a hotspot, because apparently ghosts still go there, especially on Sundays. This new church may have had a fresh coat of paint, but the Old Rock Church had followers so devoted they still came to church after they died. People have seen all sorts of ghosts and lights coming from this church, but the craziest haunting that happens there is when people hear a full choir singing. Damn, this place is lit! And number 1 on our list is Church of Greyfriars. For our first place we shoot back over to England. The Church of Greyfriars was once the most haunted place in London, but now only the spire stands. And it's haunted for good reason. It's a burial place of the Queen known as the She-Wolf of France. She had her husband killed, King Edward II, by having a hot iron rod inserted into his anus so it would burn his insides. It said you can still hear his screams. When she died, she was buried with her husband's heart on her chest. And on the full moon, her ghost will rise, clenching the beating heart of her dead husband. Yeah, you get killed by a hot poker in the butt and your screams echo out for eternity. That's how you get number 1 on this list.
Coming up at our number 10 spot, we have the Church of Satan. Well, if you grew up watching any and all Hollywood movies, then you probably are with me when I say maybe it's a good idea that these churches are banned. But despite how creepy and scary Hollywood has made these churches to be, the church states that they are not depicted in an accurate light. The Church of Satan is a church that was founded by Anton LaVey. The church does not believe in worshiping a literal, powerful, supernatural Satan. In fact, they reject people that believe in this, and they refer to themselves as skeptical atheists, people who question everything. They describe their church as an underground cell system of individuals who share the basis of our philosophy, they say. The Church of Satan isn't banned everywhere. In fact, it is quite strong in the USA. But in Canada, for example, it has been banned. But like many banned religions or banned practices for centuries and centuries, people always find a way to still do whatever they want. In our number 9 spot, we have the Okinoshima, considered a place of worship. Okinoshima is actually a forbidden island that is considered sacred land. Forbidden to all women, that is. Yeah, we're in the 21st century, but yep, there's still some places we can't go to. Wild. Only priests, researchers, military, and the media are allowed on the island. Interesting combination. Apparently no one is allowed to speak of anything they see on the island. It is that secretive. You would think that they maybe wouldn't want to invite the media to the island then, but people are strange. The island is off the coast of Munakata in Japan. The islanders are said to worship the kami, which are spirits that are venerated in the religion of Shinto. It has several spiritual traditions, including a ritual purification. This must be performed by undressing and bathing in the ocean. Archaeological evidence suggests that religious rituals have been performed there since the 4th century. So interesting. Too bad I could never go there because the idea of getting to see such a spiritual place is such an exciting thought. In our number 8 spot, we have Christianity in China. It is not unknown that China operates under a communist regime, so it will probably not surprise you to hear that in 2014, crosses on Christian places of worship were being taken down and the people were discouraged to not go there. Of course the people did anyway, and they even held an overnight vigil before the police arrived. Apparently in 2014, in the town of Wenzhou at the Longgang Township Gratitude Church, the public security officials took down the 10-foot crucifix above the church. The congregates didn't resist this action, but of course it must be extremely hard for them to know that their own people will not support their right to worship. This has happened in many towns in China over many years, and as of today, I wonder if they are still against Christianity, or more specifically, the cross symbol. If there's anyone watching who knows the answer, I would love to know in the comment section below. In our number 7 spot, we have Eritrea. Often referred to as Africa's North Korea, Eritrea has some pretty harsh viewpoints when it comes to Christianity. It is said that its president, Afwerki, has overseen a volatile authoritarian regime that rests on human rights violations. Christians that are not a part of state-approved churches are actually considered a threat to the country and an agent of the West. I've heard this so many times before. Perhaps there is something us Westerners are missing that everyone else sees. What do we believe in that is such a threat to a whole society? What do we know that makes us a threat? In the summer months of 2019, over 150 Christians were arrested. Over 70 prisoners were being held in a type of prison where they are sent to an underground tunnel where they are forced to work and dig. Christians in this country have been fleeing over the last few years due to the violence and imprisonment. In our number 6 spot, we have St. Mary the Virgin, Clophill, England. Not so much banned as it is abandoned, but considering the spookiness that seems to go on at this church, I'm banning you from ever going to check it out. Unless you're a ghost whisperer. Research purposes are allowed. Just joking, go at your own risk. This church is extremely old, being built in 1350. The locals of the town believe the church to be haunted by the devil, as the altar is facing the southern direction, which is commonly known as a symbol of hell. On another note though, people have reported ghost hauntings and satanic presence in the church, so perhaps it is the entrance to hell. Regardless, people are told to be weary of the church, but I'm sure teenagers still go there and hold seances. I would. In our number 5 spot, we have the Church of Mary of Zion. This isn't a church that is fully banned, but it does have a part of it that has been forbidden for centuries. This is a church that claims to hold the Ark of the Covenant. The Ark of the Covenant, or otherwise known as the Ark of God, is a very sacred relic of the Israelites. The area that it is being held in is banned and forbidden to any regular person. It's apparently kept in this church in the city of Axum, but there have been rumors that it was moved. Regardless, it is extremely guarded, and the monks that guard the treasure have been trained to kill with their bare hands. Okay, yeah, that's terrifying. They just sound like FBI agents. I bet they are, just dressed as monks. Anyways, the secrecy around the object has made it hard for archaeologists to confirm that it is indeed real. Apparently though, a historian once said that after viewing it, they concluded that it was a replica. But I wonder how much of that is real and how much of that is just to try to get people off the trail of wanting to see it. I doubt it would be highly protected if it wasn't real. Coming up at our number 4 spot, we have the Oradour Church in France. This is a church that has a very deadly past, and so be cautious if you go there. You have been warned. So much loss of life took place in this church that it is believed to be haunted, and many warned to not go near it for that reason. The town experienced a very deadly massacre in World War II, and specifically this church took a hit. A horrific tragedy that even though it's been many years later, the energy probably still lingers. So I ban you from going there, unless it's for educational reasons once again, then fair enough. But man, there are definitely ghosts, and I would not want someone to feel the sadness of wars past. The site is still the way that it was after this horrific day, but apparently there's talk that a new church will be built on the grounds. A lovely thought, not, but I bet you it won't get rid of the ghosts. In our number 3 spot, we have King James VI and First. Known as King James VI, King of Scots, and King James I of England and Ireland, he ruled from 1603 to 1625. England and Scotland were considered sovereign states, and yet he ruled both of them. Being the son of Mary, Queen of Scots, and just being a king in general, you can imagine the pressure that was put on him. He came across many religious challenges in his reign, and it was his decisions that led to a wave of anti-Catholicism. He might have been baptized Catholic, but he eventually became Presbyterian and then leaned Anglican during his reign. He enforced strict penalties to practicing Catholics, despite the fact that he said he would allow them to practice as long as they lay low and be quiet about it. He put policies in place that aimed at only punishing a few Catholics instead of creating massive bloodshed, with the goal to hopefully motivate practitioners to leave the country. People still practiced in private though, including one of James's friends, the first Earl of Northampton, Henry Howard. In our number 2 spot, we have the Vatican Archives. Okay, not a banned church per se, but a banned church library, filled with secrets, lies, and church documents for centuries. Arguably a church of knowledge than just a regular worship church, but I'm sure the viewers that actually get to step inside to read its books quite definitely worship the books. At least I would. This is a place that is completely banned to the everyday public. Formed in 1475, but it is believed to possibly be older. Only scholars in higher ranks within the church can enter, and the scholars must show documentation of their qualifications and research needs. People have tried to break in over the years, but the archives are heavily guarded and there has been no successful break-ins in a long time. People speculate that the archives hold proof of aliens being present on our planet, but I bet you they have way more interesting facts than that tucked away in their shelves. Probably proof of time travel. Arguably cooler than aliens? Would love to know your thoughts in the comment section below. In our number 1 spot, we have the 1535 ban on Catholic churches. As a direct response from wanting to divorce his wife, but not being allowed to, King Henry VIII of England decided to declare himself to be the only supreme head on earth of the Church of England in place of the Pope. Talk about ego. Anybody that continued to stay devoted to the Catholic Church was executed and considered martyrs to the faith. Any act of allegiance was considered treason. It wasn't until after his passing that his daughter, Queen Mary I, decided to reinstate Catholicism as England's state religion, only to have her actions reversed by Queen Elizabeth I, who would physically punish anyone who didn't attend Anglican church services, and of course, there were still a fair few that still did.
Alright, coming in at number 10, we have St. Mary the Virgin Church in Clophill in the United Kingdom. She may lay in ruins, but the chances are that this dilapidated building will ruin you. Sitting quiet in the sleepy old English village of Clophill, there is said to be a force of evil here. Blimey. Laying abandoned and in ruins is the Church of St. Mary the Virgin, built in 1350. Interestingly, the church's altar faces south, towards hell, rather than the traditional east, which is where churches usually face to point to heaven. Basically, a whole bunch of Christians believe that the south-facing altar was constructed on purpose, and that the church was secretly a satanic meeting spot. The church has a very long history of reported hauntings, and people believe that the satanic rituals still take place here. The graveyard was desecrated in the 1970s, so now all of the gravestones sit facing the perimeter wall, which kind of makes it even creepier. Coming into number 9, we have St. Paul's in New York. St. Paul's Chapel is often named the Little Chapel That Stood, and when you see pictures of it, you'll totally understand why. Built in 1766, the chapel now sits among skyscrapers at the base of the World Trade Center. It's the final resting place of Alexander Hamilton, the place that George Washington prayed on his inauguration day. It survived the Great Fire of New York and the 9/11 attacks, becoming a safe haven and spot of refuge for those who work to save people from the wreckage and put out the fires. All in all, it actually kinda sounds like a good place, so why is it so scary? I'll cut to the chase. There's a headless ghost here. A ghost without a head. Double the spooks. Actor George Frederick Cook was said to have donated his skull to the theatre to be used as the iconic piece in Hamlet. Good on him. He was buried sans head at the St. Paul's Cemetery and is now said to wander the grounds looking for his, head. St. Paul isn't the worst of them for sure. I actually kind of think it's a bit quirky and I like the sound of a headless ghost. Coming into number 8 we have the Chernobyl Church. Has anyone watched Chernobyl on Netflix? Yeah, I haven't, but I keep meaning to. I hear it's really good. Let me know if you have in the comment section. Anyway, on the 28th of April 1986, a nuclear reactor exploded at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant near Pripyat. Since that day there has been a 10-kilometer exclusion zone that won't be safe to enter for a very long time. Nuclear cleanup is still too dangerous and is set for the year 2065, which is 80 years on from the disaster. Right now there are a whole load of abandoned places sitting there, poisoned and spooky. Some people have even broken into the exclusion zone to see them, although very much at their own risk. One adventurer came across this old, sad and abandoned church in Krasny village in the exclusion zone. Yikes! Abandoned and radioactive. Do you want to have a look inside? Of course you do! Honestly, like, so spooky. Spookier still, coming into number 7 we have Egg Hill Church in Pennsylvania. Egg Hill kinda sounds like a cute, sweet place, doesn't it? But actually, it really isn't. The now abandoned Egg Hill Church is rumoured to be one of the more haunted buildings in the world, filled with unholy spirits. According to legend, a pastor arrived on the job in 1927 and shortly after he delivered his sermon, he decided to kill his entire flock as they took Holy Communion. Then, he killed himself by hanging himself. I can't confirm this with research, it's likely just an urban legend, but nonetheless a lot of people think that the building is extremely haunted and very hateful. Coming into number 6 we have St. Michan's Church in Dublin. Ireland. A country of so much rich history. Rich history can also be translated to a lot of dead people over the years too. It's kind of the case with this church. It was built in 1095 on the site of an old Norse chapel. It has a history of dead people extending back 1,000 years, which is bound to give a place a certain vibe. The church was rebuilt in 1686 and a large pipe organ was installed. Apparently Handel is said to have first played his Messiah. Despite the change in building structure, the crypt remained the same. Now the crypt is made of limestone, which is perfect for preserving mummies. Amongst the bodies in the crypt are an 800-year-old crusader, a 400-year-old nun, 2 brothers who took part in a rebellion against the British, a thief identified by their missing hands. Fact for you, up until July 2017, visitors were actually allowed to touch the mummies. Oddly, while the crypt is really good for preserving human remains, it seems that the wooden coffins that they're buried in just keep bursting open and exposing bodies. Ugh. Sadly, in February 2019, the crypt was broken into and bodies were assaulted. The head of the crusader was stolen and the nun's body was chopped and decapitated. Another body was turned over in its grave. So who would disrespect the dead like this? We don't know, but luckily the crusader's head was eventually found and returned to the body, but I'm thinking there are some angry mummies in that crypt. Coming into number 5 we have the Borgund Stave Church in Norway. I would love to go to Norway, but to me this is just looking creepy from the off. Creepy, but I have to say a little bit cool. It kind of looks less like a church and more so like a witch's mansion, or maybe the Weasley's burrow. I guess that is kind of a witch's and wizard's home, even if they're good ones, but still, it's creepy just to look at. The church is slap bang in the middle of a medieval cemetery, and it is made from wood, but has somehow stood for 1,000 years, which to me is even more weird. There are strange engravings of animals and mystical creatures inside, and ancient runes to boot. Here be witches? Dragons? The imagination runs wild. Do you like unexplained wailing sounds? If so, you will love this at number 4. We have the Church of St. Andrew on Staten Island. This church dates back to the early 1700s and is located in Richmond, Staten Island. The church was used as a hospital during the American Revolution, and it seems to have left a deep scar on the building. These days it is said that the spirits of the dead soldiers haunt the halls, wailing, walking, knocking, creeping, just generally being creepy little ghosts. Candles flicker without wind, and some claim to have seen them float. There's a chill in the air here, even on a hot, heavy summer's day. Coming into number 3, we have Oradour-sur-Glane Church in France. This is one of the saddest and scariest church stories of all time. War was an abysmal period of time for Europe, and between the two feuds, decades were lost to bloodshed. While the majority of the countries eventually recovered, deep scars were left in the land. A number of places that existed before simply didn't survive, including Oradour-sur-Glane. On the 10th of June 1944, German SS soldiers destroyed the French village, killing 642 of its inhabitants, with just 20 people managing to escape. The black shirts rounded up the men and shot them at point-blank range in a barn, but the church was a true horror. Women and children were rounded up into the village church, locked inside, and then burned alive as German soldiers set fire to the holy building. Hundreds of innocent people lost their lives in these walls. Honestly, I feel really bad for the people that had to go and find them there. French president of the time, Charles de Gaulle, ordered that the town remained untouched as a memorial to those who lost their lives in the savage attack. People can still visit the area and see the village left ransacked as it was that night. They can also see what remains of the church, if they dare. Coming into number 2, we have the Sedlec Ossuary in Czech Republic. It isn't the outside of this church that is the issue. Have a little look. See, no scarier than any other church, right? Well, my friends, step inside. This church is filled with the remains of 40 to 70,000 people, which, yikes. Not even that, like out of sight, out of mind. If they were buried somewhere or like in the walls, that would be fine. But this chapel is decorated with the bones and skulls of the dead. There are pillars made out of bones, a chandelier of bones, a coat of arms made from actual arms, and then like, I'm sorry, but why is there a skull on this cherub's knee? I'm honestly kind of petrified. Why are their skulls holding bones in their mouths? This is macabre and I don't like it. It seems that the church dates back to 1278, but in the early 16th century, bones were exhumed by a blind monk. A lot of the bones are thought to belong to plague victims. Ugh. So, how do you top a church made of bones? Ho ho ho.
In at number 10, this creepy video was captured at the Lincoln Cathedral in England. First of all, the exterior of this church looks like it could be the set of a horror movie, and what possessed this person to go to church at night? I have no idea. Well, it's a little bit too dark and windy for my liking. Well, things took a turn for the worse when they stumbled across this. Well, take a look for yourself. Okay, did I see that right? It looks like a face is protruding from the wall, and then all of a sudden it disappears when the cameraman went to investigate it. I'd be getting the heck out of there, and I'd probably never return to that church ever again. I'd probably have to make a pit stop to another church because I have to do some Hail Marys after seeing that ghost head. A creepy art project is up next at number 9. The St. George Church was left abandoned after the roof collapsed. The locals in the area saw this as a bad omen, so they didn't even want to repair the church. But I guess an art student took it upon themselves to fill in the pews with creepy ghost figures instead. Take a look. Okay, this is not okay in my books. Actually, this might be the scariest art project that I've ever seen. I feel like if the church wasn't haunted before, well, it definitely is now. A shadowy figure is up next at number 8. This extremely scary picture was taken inside of a Catholic church somewhere over in Poland. Everyone there was celebrating a First Communion, but the party was crashed by the shadowy figure who was seen creeping between the aisles. It's quite possible that this is just the result of a camera malfunctioning, but the thing is, are you willing to bet your life on that? I know I'm not. Insane insect infestation crawls onto our list at number 7. I get it, sometimes older buildings have an insect problem. You might see the occasional ant or centipede. You know, I can forgive that, but what I can't forgive is this. Is this real life right now? Is this the only church in town? Why are people content with this? How the heck can you be singing at a time like this? I mean, you all need to bathe in some holy water and all stand in front of a strong fan to get all of those termites off of you. This is not okay. I'm pretty sure this church needs an exorcism and an exterminator at the same time. Number 6, the man with glowing eyes. During a service at a church, someone accidentally captured this picture of a man with some pretty unsettling eyes. Some people are even saying that this creature isn't even human, while others think that he's wearing glasses and it's just the light reflecting off of them. I honestly don't know what to believe. He kind of looks like a gnome from hell, and those people in the church might be in a whole lot of trouble. But did you guys also notice there's a weird floating object hovering over the guy next to the gnome? I mean, what the heck is going on in this church? I think everyone inside needs to be blessed. Bringing us to number 5, we have a ghost spirit caught on camera. A paranormal investigation team were exploring an old abandoned church in England, when they stumbled across this eerie sight. Okay, let's play that again, but in slow motion. As you can see, a ghostly figure passes by one of the windows, and it looks like they're wearing a long white dress or robe of some sort. This church dates back to 1135, so it's very possible that it's had its fair share of scary ghost encounters. Next up on our list, number 4, we have a Jesus statue caught moving. Okay, pay close attention to the statue's eyes, because what I'm about to show you guys is gonna happen pretty quickly. Okay, let's play that again, but in slow motion. How the heck did the guy filming this have no reaction whatsoever? I'm completely traumatized, and I wasn't even there for that. I feel like Jesus was staring into my soul, and he didn't even like what he saw, so he just closed his eyes. This statue of Jesus Christ is located inside of the church in Mexico, and since this video was released, thousands of people have been going to this church to watch the statue move for themselves. But I'm pretty sure a moving statue would just deter me from ever visiting it. A ghost makes an appearance at a shrine, and this takes us to number 3. This next clip I'm about to show you guys was taken in a church over in Ireland. This church houses the national shrine of St. Oliver Plunkett, who was an Irish saint who was condemned to death. And that was although he was completely innocent. So you're gonna see his cell door and possibly St. Oliver Plunkett himself. Watch.
This is the door of the cell in Newgate prison, where St. Oliver Plunkett was in prison for 8 months.
He's a very interesting figure, because he was...
Okay, no, you're not crazy. I think I saw him as well. So it could be possible that his spirit is still attached to the cell door, or could something more sinister be going on here? Well, you know what? I'll let you guys be the judge of that. Jesus is caught moving again, and this takes us to number 2. Seriously, what is up with all these moving Jesus statues? Stop it! I'm really not okay with this, but you guys clicked on this video, so you know what? Here's another scary clip for you. Okay, what did I just watch? This is the reason why I don't go to church. There's too much scariness happening there. I think I'm developing an irrational fear of Jesus statues. I thought church was supposed to be a safe place, but instead of being comforted, I'm being tormented. Dark shadowy figure creeps onto our list at number 1. Well, take a look at this picture right here. It looks like the church might have a demon problem, maybe multiple demons. I don't know what's worse, those termites that we just saw or this devilish demon. And I can't even make out what this thing is. It looks like he has really long arms and legs. Maybe he's a spider demon. Well, whatever he is, I never want to see him in the flesh, because I honestly don't think that I would be walking out of that church alive.
Number 10, the Duomo, Florence, Italy. This is one of the coolest places I've ever been, and I had to put it on this list. I've been to Italy once in my life, and this was the highlight of the trip for me, and I did not expect it to be, because I was like, oh, this is a really beautiful church, and then I was like, whoa, living Assassin's Creed, and it was amazing. Besides living out your Assassin's Creed Ezio dreams, not only is the cathedral stunning, but the trip to the the top is nothing like you'd expect. I walked in expecting to solely marvel at the frescoes immediately inside, which are breathtaking, but then there was a guy by a small door where you could pay to travel the 463 steps it takes to get to the top. I'm not the one to skip a leg day, so challenge accepted. It wasn't just a spiral staircase, which honestly thank goodness because I would have but anyways, it was that plus scaling steep narrow pathways and traveling through narrow tunnels. Whoever pictured monks as rounded and out of shape was dead wrong, especially if they were climbing that every day. Number 9, the Braunston Goddess. You would expect statues of the Virgin Mary and Jesus to be present in churchyards and chapels, but this little stone sculpture isn't really as self-explanatory. In the 1920s in Braunston and Rutland, their All Saints Church front steps needed replacing. As they removed the stones, they came across this strange little sculpture. With 2 noses, a tongue sticking out, protruding breasts and bulging eyes, no one could quite place who or what it was supposed to be. Some believe it's a medieval guardian sculpture to frighten off evil spirits, or some kind of malicious monarch depiction, or even a pagan deity, but the style of carving doesn't match anything previously known, so it could be anything and remains a mystery to this day. Number 8, the Devil's Footprints. Ooh. One night, the devil himself, for whatever reason, tried to steal the bell from the tower of St. Dave's Church in Lanarth. A vicar, however, awoke to the noise and chased the fiend into the graveyard, and the man's foot ignited a fiery footprint on the stone before he left. A similar case befell St. Mary's Churchyard in Newington, Kent, but this time the devil succeeded in stealing the bells. I don't know what it is about the devil and bells, he just loves them, he wants them for himself. The devil leapt from the tower with the bells in a bag and left a fiery footprint on a stone before he left. He accidentally dropped the bells into a stream in his escape, and a local witch said that in order to retrieve them, they'd need 4 pure white cows. When they found the cows seemed to be doing the job until an onlooker was like, "Look, there's a black dot on one of them," and then the bells went back into the stream because they weren't pure white. But you can actually visit the stone with said footprint atop it, and it is said that if you place a finger on top and walk around it 3 times, it will bring you good luck. Better luck than the devil had, at least. He just couldn't get a handle on those bells. Number 7, St. Catherine of Siena's head. There's gonna be a lot of heads on this list, so get ready for a lot of head puns. Out of all the heads we are going to discuss today, Catherine's looks the best. Like, she's got some kind of secret to the whole like decomposition thing. Like, she looks pretty good. When she was just 7 years old, Catherine had visions that led her to pursue a life in the church with fervor. Her family tried to marry her off, so she cut her hair and scalded her body and ran off to become a nun. When she joined the nunnery, she had a powerful vision of Jesus placing a ring made of his skin, the flesh that was removed during his circumcision, which was revered at the time for some reason, and claimed Catherine in marriage. For the rest of her life, Catherine claimed that she could always see the flesh ring on her finger. Her miracles included levitating during prayer and receiving stigmata, which are holy bodily marks. She died in Rome, but people in Siena, her hometown, wanted a part of her there, so they went to Rome and stole her head. When the guards caught them, they prayed to Catherine, and when the guards looked in the bag, it was entirely filled with rose petals. When the guards left, the head returned, and it is said that that was her final miracle. They also have a piece of her thumb, which isn't mentioned in the story, but I assume that turned into a rose petal as well. Number 6, the tongue and jaw of St. Anthony. Have you ever seen an 800-year-old tongue? Do you want to? Well, you're in luck. Okay, so we've talked about heads being prized, but this church decided to go ahead and covet something else instead. St. Anthony was known for giving terrific and captivating sermons all across Italy and France that seemed to have a unique pull to them. Due to his work in life, Anthony was canonized after his death, but it took 30 years for his body to be exhumed and buried in a new basilica. It was then that they discovered that his tongue and jaw looked miraculously like it hadn't decomposed a single day. So they buried the rest of his body and put the jaw and tongue in a sacred display case. St. Anthony is the saint of lost things, and people go there to pray to him that they will find what they've lost. Hopefully Anthony doesn't feel like he lost anything when they took his tongue. The Church of Transfiguration. This church is interesting not because of what you may find inside it, but because of what you won't. Should you choose to visit Kizzy Island, you may want to spend some time at the Church of Transfiguration to marvel at the architecture and learn more about the unique way it was built. The church was entirely constructed out of wood and does not include a single nail or screw. The entire church is holding itself together through a series of intricately placed interlocking logs. Now, some when they think of that would be picturing like a simple log cabin kind of thing, but no, it's incredibly intricate and features rounded teardrop domes and fine points, so what an incredible architectural feat. Number 4, St. John's Head, another one! Imagine having a head everyone wants to get their hands on. Like, just imagine being that person. This object, it sounds weird to be calling it an object. Anyways, this weird preserved head has been found in several places across the globe, and unless St. John the Baptist had several heads, it can't all be the real thing. And also, how did you even find it? But the most famous places you can go to decide for yourself are the Basilica of St. Sylvester I in Rome, or the St. Den's Church in Munich, Germany. Both claim to have the head on display for all to see of the legendary John the Baptist. Except in Rome, they've chosen to serve it up on a silver platter, while in Munich, they've cloaked it in fine fabric and jewels. The head also appears in Damascus in a mosque, also covered by fabric. So, I don't know, maybe the skull takes turns? Who knows? Okay, we're getting to our top 3, guys. If you like this video, you know what to do. Remember to like, comment, subscribe, because it helps us out and we love you for it. And also lets us know we're doing a good job. Number 3, the head of Oliver Plunkett. Here is yet another church that's ahead of its game. Oliver Plunkett was an Irish Catholic archbishop who died as a martyr and was the last, in fact, during the Popish plot. Long story short, when Henry VIII left the church, centuries of strife followed between the Catholics and the Protestants, which led to the alleged Popish plot. A rumored alleged plot by the Catholics to kill Charles II and put his Catholic brother James on the throne. Whether or not the plot was actually real, no one knows. Either way, Oliver Plunkett was arrested, drawn and quartered in 1681, and remains one of the most famous Catholic figures in Ireland to this day. After his death, his head was first brought to Rome and hidden in 1921, and now sits in St. Peter's Church in Drogheda, Ireland. He's got a scorch mark on his face because apparently someone tried to burn the head before it was saved by his friends. So it's there, you can see it, and there's only one of them this time. Number 2, the Sinead Chapel. So yes, today we are covering weird things found in churches, but what about churches found inside weird things? Located in Allouville-Belfast in northern France is a church inside an oak tree. Sinead Chapel, aka Chapel Oak as it translates to, honestly looks like a church designed for a scene in a Tim Burton film. The oak tree is over 800 years old, and legend says that William the Conqueror chose this tree to pray beneath before he left for England. When lightning hit the tree in the 17th century, it sealed the tree's fate as becoming a place of worship. There is an entire spiral staircase that surrounds the tree with 2 tiny chapels inside. It was later converted to a temple of reason to save it from French revolutionary atheists who tried to burn it down. But today it remains, and you can still visit it today. You can still visit it today either to pray or marvel at the spectacle. It's up to you. Number 1, Basilica of St. Ursula. A church made of bones. A sign of respect to a group of women made martyrs when they arrived in Rome. Basilica of St. Ursula in Cologne is the largest mosaic made from human body parts, and according to legend, they include the bones of an English princess named Ursula. St. Ursula lived somewhere between 300 to 600 AD and decided to go on a pilgrimage in Europe. But given the time as well as the fact that she was a princess, she could not travel alone. So she took a force of 1,000 virgin women with her. Their ship allegedly blew across the sea to Rome in a single day, but then another ambitious wind swept them off course to Cologne. Unfortunately for Ursula and her league, the Huns were ravaging Europe at that time and were captured shortly into their journey. The elegant way of saying what happened is to say that they were martyred, so we'll say that. Relics of the princess were housed in the basilica, but in the Middle Ages a pit of bones were discovered. The bones were believed to be those of the princess and her followers, and they were placed within the church so that they may finally be at rest. Unfortunately, due to forensic analysis, the bones also include men, dogs, and babies. lady, so I guess there are a lot of questions here that need answers. So if they're not St. Ursula's, whose are they?
Starting off this countdown, we have absolving sins with money. Basically, back in the day, the Catholic Church told people that they could absolve their sins and get a ticket to heaven if they just paid them. Like, you were paying the church for forgiveness. Sorry, that's not how these things work. It also got to the point where people were paying for future sins. Not only that, they claimed that for a fee, relatives could get their deceased loved ones out of purgatory. And people fell for this all. Not only that, but poor people thought that they were screwed. They're like, if we sin, it's over. We can't afford to pay to get our sins forgiven. I wouldn't be surprised if the rich went around committing crimes and killing people, then being like, here's some cash, I'm all good now, thanks. In our 9th spot, we have imprisoning Galileo. In 1663, Galileo was like, science is greater than God. He also said that the sun was the center of the universe and claimed that the earth moved around it. I mean, he was on to something there, but just, he was slightly off. Anyways, the church didn't like these claims because it conflicted with the teachings of the church, so they imprisoned him. He was imprisoned in his home for years. I mean, they threatened him with torture, imprisonment, and even being burned at the stake, so let's just say he got off easy compared to those other punishments. It wasn't until 350 years later did the church be like, okay, yes, we agree, Galileo was on to something. Moving on to number 8, we have cutting funding. For years, the church gave thousands of dollars to a non-profit organization, Compañeros, that would help Hispanic immigrants get access to healthcare, among other things. That was until they found out that Compañeros supported a gay and lesbian rights group. So the church cut the funding to this company for their connection to the LGBTQ2S+ community. They're not the only group that the church has done this to, though. No, apparently, and I quote, since 2010, 9 groups from across the country have lost financing from the campaign because of conflicts with Catholic principles. Moving on to number 7, we have the gay clergy member. In 2018, a secret Catholic group came forward claiming they had information all about their clergy member, Monsignor Jeffrey Burrell. They claimed that he was using the gay male dating app Grindr and would visit gay bars weekly. Now let me just say, there's nothing wrong with being gay. What's wrong is shaming this poor man and outing him, and the poor man had to resign. Obviously, this is something the Catholic Church doesn't want us to know. Why? Because they say homosexual acts is immoral and contrary to the natural law. They also say homosexual tendencies are objectively disordered. And they also preach celibacy. So having a clergy member that is gay is highly controversial for them, and they tried to hide it. A lot of Catholics were outraged when word got out. Scariest part is how they found out about Jeffrey in the first place. Apparently the group was tracking his movements based on the apps he was using. Pretty terrifying and also very, very wrong. Moving on to number 6, we have Joan of Arc. Turns out that the church wasn't the biggest fan of Joan of Arc. In fact, at one point she was pretty much the Catholic Church's #1 public enemy. Long story short, she believed that God was speaking to her and had told her to start an uprising to get the English out of France. By doing so, she pissed off some high-powered Catholics who wanted her gone. So they decided to put her up for trial. But legit, they had no evidence against her, but they were like, whatever, fake it till you make it, right? So they just accused her of heresy with no evidence, cause it was a lie. And on top of that, they denied her counsel, which was against the church's rules. They just hated her and wanted to get rid of her. I think there were like 70+ charges brought up against her. One of them being for wearing men's clothing, in which she was burned at the stake for. In 1431, in front of a crowd of thousands of people, they lit her on fire for wearing male clothing. But it was discovered after her death that she never even did this. Literally, they killed an innocent woman. Why? Because they were probably intimidated by her. We are now at our 5th and halfway mark with the slaying of women. Pope Innocent VII wasn't innocent at all. In fact, he was terrified of witches. He said that they were real and a huge threat, so he created a huge witch hunt. He dispatched his men to Germany to try witches, and due to the pressure he put on them, countless innocent women were killed after being accused of being witches. All because Pope Innocent was paranoid as hell. Not only that, but in 1487 a book was written all about these witches. It said that this book promoted burning them at the stake, and that influenced a number of killings. Plus, the book was just filled with lies, like saying these women would stop cows from producing milk and would ride on broomsticks in the air. It's just truly messed up and spread misinformation and paranoia. In our fourth spot, we have the burning of the dead. Apparently, the church holds grudges because 43 years after John Wycliffe passed away, they had his body dug up and burned. Now, let me explain how it got to this point. So, John saw fault in the Roman Catholic Church and saw how it was corrupt. So he believed that people should worship God and Jesus according to the Bible, not according to the popes and their bishops and priests, because people are corrupt. But the Bible is not. He also believed that people should interpret the Bible for themselves and not how other people tell them to interpret it. Well, the church did not like this at all. So when he passed away, they ordered all his books to be burned. They also ordered for his body to be unburied. And for some reason, it took them years to get this all done. So 43 years later, his body was finally unburied and then torched, and then his ashes were just thrown into the river. In our third spot, we have the misuse of power. Just this year, it was discovered that the French clergy had taken advantage of over 200,000 young individuals since the 1950s. It is absolutely disgusting. The height of this happened between the 1950s to the 1970s. That's when most of the cases were discovered. Then there was a resurgence of cases in the early 1990s. And obviously the Catholic Church doesn't want anyone to know about this. In fact, it's obvious that the church was turning a blind eye to the perpetrators. They were more focused on protecting themselves and their reputation. They did not care for the victims at all. A report said, and I quote, "The Catholic Church's immediate reaction was to protect itself as an institution, and it has shown complete, even cruel indifference to those having suffered abuse." Like I said, it's absolutely disgusting. Moving on to number 2, we have the number of priests. In January of 2002, it was discovered that 234 priests have had allegations of sexual misconduct made against them in the last 50 years. You heard me, 234. That just makes me sick to my stomach. These individuals are using their title and control to take advantage of others. Some of the victims did file lawsuits against a number of dioceses and got multiple $1-million settlements in some cases, but that still does not take away their trauma and their PTSD. Even though the Catholic Church held a worldwide summit to talk about all this, it wasn't that effective, as priests were still caught taking advantage of individuals years later. By now, we all know about the corruption within the Catholic Church, and the more I dig, the worse it gets. From constant cover-ups and lies to years of illegal activity. Let's talk about this and more only in today's video. Starting off this countdown, we have Pope Boniface VIII. This dude was the definition of corrupt and disgusting. So he was the head of the Catholic Church from 1294 until his death in 1303. Let's just say that he did not practice what the church was preaching. This dude was known to take advantage of a number of young men. In response, he said that it was as natural as rubbing one hand against the other. So he said taking advantage of the young was totally fine. Not only that, but one time he got it on with a married woman and her daughter. I know. It's gross. In our 9th spot, we have simony. Simony is something that was practiced around the Middle Ages. It's the act of buying your way into church offices. This became a huge problem in the 9th and 10th century. So basically, the church was selling positions in the office. This allowed people who had money to become clergy members. Half the time, they weren't even educated and couldn't even read or didn't know how to perform ordinary religious services. But what the church only cared about was money. In 1487, the Pope sold 24 offices, and people were outraged because
because unqualified people were becoming bishops or cardinals. The church would also do this with religious items. They would sell them for tons of money and people would foolishly buy them from the church. In our 8th spot, we have the Pittsburgh priests. A couple of years ago, it was revealed that 6 Pennsylvania priests routinely took advantage of a number of individuals over the course of several decades. One disturbing report claims that they made a young man pose like Christ on the cross while they photographed him doing so. The photos were then sent to a number of other priests. The total amount of priests accused are 300. This is absolutely disgusting and I feel so bad for the innocent victims that were taken advantage of. In our 7th spot, we have ignoring the situation. When Pope Francis heard the story that I just mentioned, you know what he had to say? He said, and I quote, "Most of these cases belong in the past." Meaning, hey, thanks for coming forward, but let's move on from the past and ignore everything that happened. He continued on saying, and I quote, "If one member suffers, all suffer together with it." He said that after it was revealed how many priests were found guilty. Now, people weren't happy by him saying this because, first off, he's never going to feel the same suffering as the victims, and second, he's more worried about how bad this makes the church look rather than bringing justice for the victims. In our 6th spot, we have hiding the past. People are incredibly furious how the Pope handled all of the allegations made against the priests. The right thing for him to do would be allow criminal authorities to access the church records worldwide, so they can try and get justice for all the victims and get rid of the men taking advantage of their power and position. But of course, he won't allow that, nor will the other men who run the church. Instead, it's let's keep it all hush hush and hope no other victims come forward. We are now at our 5th and halfway mark with the years of cover-ups. Back in 2018, it was revealed that Bishop Juan Barros of Chile was accused of covering up clerical abuse for years. The bishop denied, saying he never knew about this, but one of the victims say that he was there when one of the incidents happened and bore witness to it all and then did nothing. For years, this bishop covered up several incidences and protected the perpetrators. This just makes me sick. After being called out though, he did resign. Coming in at number 4, we have the punishments for disobeying. Bishop Gonzalo Duarte Garcia de Cortazar is another member of the Catholic Church that used his power to take advantage of a number of individuals. There were reports of him doing this all the way back to 1992. Back in 1992, he publicly slapped a student because the student refused to kiss him on the lips. In fact, this was common. If the students wouldn't do as he told them to, they would be slapped or punished. And Bishop Juan Barros was responsible for covering this all up, so word wouldn't get out. Coming in at number 3, we have the slush funds. The church has also been known to do sketchy and illegal things with their money, such as move Vatican money through slush funds across Europe. On top of that, they used $250 million of the church's money to invest in luxury London apartments, which ultimately tanked. They even contemplated investing hundreds of millions of dollars into oil fields. This money was supposed to support palpable charities. They also have a history of embezzlement, fraud, and money laundering. How great is that? Of course though, they'll always get away with it because they're the church. And in our number 1 spot today, we have the Catholic clergy in France. Just this year, it was found that Catholic clergy members in France took advantage of over 216,000 individuals over the past 7 decades. Again, that is absolutely disgusting. On top of that, a report found that the church prioritized its own protection, so it told the victims to stay silent. It said that between 29,000 to 32,000 predators worked in the French Catholic Church between 1950 to 2020. The report also found, and I quote, "The church's attitude could be summarized as one of concealment, relativization, or even denial, with only a very recent recognition dating from 2015. The Catholic Church's immediate reaction was to protect itself as an institution, and it has shown complete, even cruel indifference to those having suffered it." Starting off this countdown, we have the nuns. In 2019, Pope Francis for the first time addressed the horrors that happened to nuns in the Catholic Church. Priests and bishops and other church officials have been taking advantage of nuns for ages. This was an ongoing problem for years, and the church wasn't doing anything about it. They were too busy focusing on covering up even bigger scandals and issues. Over the years, more and more nuns have come forward saying that they were victims. Some were afraid to speak up because they were dependent dependent on the church and literally couldn't leave. Although Pope Francis acknowledged what happened, it's unclear the steps they are taking to prevent it in the future. In our 9th spot today, we have the Knights Templar. So Philip IV of France, as well as the Catholic Church, are directly responsible for torturing and executing innocent individuals back in the 14th century. Basically, Philip did not like the Templars in Spain and wanted to get rid of them. So he sent out his men to round them up, arrest them, and then imprison them. He then accused the innocent men of terrible crimes like sodomy, heresy, and renouncing Christ. Any of those crimes were punishable by the death penalty. Again, they were innocent, he just wanted to get rid of the Templar order. He then would torture the Templars so that they would confess. He would use a rack to stretch out their shoulders until they dislocated, or he would have their private parts smashed. This was all done while the church knew that the men were innocent. In our 8th spot, we have Pope Pius XII. In this case, it's what the church didn't do. According to a recent discovery of archives, Pope Pius XII was fully aware what the Nazis were doing during the Holocaust and chose to remain silent. He knew of the mass executions of the Jewish individuals and he dismissed this all. In fact, he said that they were unable to confirm the crimes, so that's why he didn't speak up against them. It says a lot when they refused to publicly condemn the Nazis. In fact, apparently his silence was so that the Germans didn't come for them, so that the church could always be successful. They were just caring about themselves and not about the thousands of innocent individuals being killed. Moving on to number 7, we have the violent murders. Back in 1095, Pope Urban II gave rise to the Crusades during his reign as the head of the Catholic Church. He called all Christians in Europe to go to war against the Muslims. And it was not pretty. It literally said that they killed so many Muslims that the street ran with blood. And this was only the beginning. Waves of crusades continued until 1396, and although Catholics were not the only religion involved in mass violence, Pope Urban got it all started. And it was a violent time to say the least. Everyone was killed, no matter their age. Some people's heads were even put on sticks and then they would carry them around to scare others. Like, that is hella messed up. In our 6th spot today, we have William Tyndale. During the 16th century, William took it upon himself to translate the Bible into vernacular English so that more people were able to read it. But for some reason, the Catholic Church did not like him doing this, which is weird. Wouldn't they want the Bible translated so more people would become followers of it? Anyways, William actually had to go into hiding because the church was coming for him. They even burned copies of the Bible that were being smuggled around Europe. In the end, William was captured, tried for heresy, and then burned at the stake. He literally did nothing wrong. Want to know something even more messed up? Years later, the church was like, yes, let's translate the Bibles. They then turned to William's translations and used a whole lot of it, and then they never even apologized. Ridiculous. We are now at our 5th and halfway mark with Pope Alexander VI. So, Pope Alexander VI was said to be one of the worst popes in history. Why? Well, he is known for something known as the Banquet of Chestnuts. He basically invited 50 women over and told them to strip for him. Then he threw chestnuts on the floor and forced the women to get on their hands and knees and just surround their feet like animals. To make matters worse, he told the men that he invited that he would give the man who could get it on with the most women jewelry or fine clothes. So then they were all fighting over these women. This guy was hella corrupt and sick. Not only that, but he liked to watch horses get it on. That is disgusting. In our 2nd spot, we have the funding. CBC News and the Globe and Mail recently obtained files that expose the Catholic Church for spending some of the $79 million that it agreed to pay residential school survivors. That's right, they spent money that was meant to go to survivors of their residential schools. But instead, they took most of that money and put it into things like their Bible study group or for their personal lawyers and unapproved loans. Whereas other churches, including the Anglican, United, and Presbyterian Church, paid the full amount of compensation owed to the survivors without an issue. But the Catholic Church took the money and used it for themselves, which is disgusting since they played the biggest role in residential schools and the horrors that took place there.